Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We love having you here, and it's our mission to bring you all the latest and greatest tips, skills, and know-how to make you the best that you can be. We know that you have it in you, and we're going to show you how. Now, let's get started.
Now, countries of the world seem to be facing countless problems, from media issues, social-political, geopolitical issues, economic, social issues, foreign policies, and the likes. Now, there had been a lot of debates, countless debates in all of these issues, yet the problem seems not to be abating. These are some of the discussion, the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, we like to address. Now, on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, we like to focus on what has not worked and what will make it work, focusing on government and politics and other subtopics like the environment, society and culture, and science and technology. We'll be talking about social policy for the 21st century, and I have Lance Hillsinger on the show with me. Now, Lance is an author and also a retired social worker. Welcome with me on the Backstory, Lance Hillsinger.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me, Lance. You're an author of 2 books, and one of your books also talk about social policy for the 21st century. Now, purpose of social policy.
Well, the main social policy is to do things that the government does that people can't do individually or through charity programs. What are we going to do? Are we going to build a bridge, or are we going to have a food stamp program, or are we going to be both? How much tax do we take from people who have money and give it to people who don't have money in some sort of form of government program, food stamps, cash assistance, housing assistance? That's a debate. I don't think there's a perfect answer there, but we should always kind of try to make it as perfect as we can be.
So now I'd like us to address 2 out of the important areas of social policy, which you're so familiar with, especially in the US. We talk about living, the state of living in the US, and also in poverty, the living conditions. So what's your view, especially in these 2 issues?
Well, I think one of the critical things is the cost of housing. And the cost of housing has greatly exceeded the rate of inflation. And that has driven people who normally would have been able to purchase their first home to perpetually rent. After World War II, many people became first-time homeowners because of the GI program. The number of people who are veterans is declining as a percentage of the population, so there's not that many people. And even with that program, it's very difficult to find housing. So what can we do as a society to increase the capacity of housing? Does that mean tax breaks for corporations to provide employee-owned housing? Does it say something like for workforce housing? We here in San Luis Obispo is extremely expensive. We're almost as expensive as San Francisco. But how does a police officer or a firefighter or a teacher afford housing when the average home goes for $700,000 or more? So let's look at some ways that we could do that. Does that mean a shared equity program where perhaps the firefighter, the teacher can buy a $350,000 home and the local government pay the other half? And then when the home sells, they can split the profits. Maybe that's a solution to the problem. The Habitat for Humanity is a well-regarded program, Jimmy Carter, but the number of homes that program is built is a tiny, tiny fraction of the need. Is there a way that we can kind of commercialize that and allow people to build sweat equity, not necessarily in their own home that they're building, which is the conventional way, but in some sort of community process? That you devote so many hours to community programs, and you contribute to your community, and that's your sweat equity. One of the things that is so very important is that is to pass down equity to the next generation. That is probably why there's such income disparity, because it wasn't until after World War II, that African Americans owned any kind of percentage of homes, and that started to increase and then has plateaued and hasn't changed much in the last 20, 30 years. And that's true for Hispanics. Their rate of homers compared to whites is much lower, and it's remaining static in price because everyone's being priced out of the market. And one of the things I think we forget in that debate is that it's simple demographics. In my lifetime, the population of California has more than doubled, but the size of California has stayed stagnant. It's the same. And if you have so many people who are wanting the same product, whether that's a house or a car or whatever, it's going to drive the price up. And so we need to address population growth as one of the anti-poverty measures.
Why do you think, Alans, why do you think that the US cannot end poverty?
Well, I think the war on poverty that was launched in the 60s has reduced the poverty rate from the high teens to the low teens. But the problem has been, again, the population expansion. So there's more poor people in the United States than there were when the war on poverty was first begun. So that's just simply a factor of demographics. I think part of it, there's, of course, multiple reasons. One of the things I talk about in my book is that the number of jobs that are available that are what we used to call head of household jobs is fewer and fewer. You have competition from overseas, you have automation, you have those social issues that have nothing to do with whether a person is qualified for a job or not. You can have a person very qualified for a job, but if there's no jobs out there, for instance, our local community college here offers, like many community colleges, a program in welding. You can earn a certificate in welding. But there's not a real big demand for welders in our community. So you may be the best trained apprentice welder in the county, but you may find it very difficult to find work because there's just not those jobs out there anymore.
Even research shows that the standard of living is high by the standards most economists use. How valid is this, Lance?
Well, I don't think our per capita income used to be close to the top, and now I think we're drifted down to, to the teens as far as compared to other countries. I think there's great disparity. The top 5% in the United States live a lot better than the bottom 5%, and that disparity is much, much greater than it would be in other countries. I think part of it is that we have a fairly liberal immigration policy that absorbs so many people who are poor that just per capita you're going to reduce that. And I also think, again, that we go back to opportunities that I think sometimes our programs haven't always been well out. For instance, for welfare, if you're poor, you can get cash aid, and you have to work. But there's an exemption. If you have a 1-year exemption, you can do that. But 1 year of training at a community college is not going to get you to be financially self-sufficient. You probably need a 2-year degree to get some sort of job where you will be financially sufficient. So our government is short-sighted here that we allow only a 1-year exemption from the welfare to work program, because that doesn't really get the woman, typically it is the woman to become economically self-sufficient. So there's all sorts there's not any one single factor. It's partly, automation. As I point out, again, to bring it back to San Luis Obispo, we have municipal parking garages like most cities do. A few years back, they went to an automated system. You could have been the best parking lot attendant in the city and have a great work ethic, but now there's a machine that's taken over your job. So those things, I think that kind of microcosm of our city is replicated many, many places. And that's why manufacturing jobs that used to be good paying, reliable jobs, we have roughly 2/3 of the manufacturing jobs that we did in the 1990s. Is that anybody's fault? No, it's just sort of the market forces. Market forces from foreign competition, market forces because of automation. But what do we have to do as far as those social policies? The person who in previous generations would have a decent factory paying, union paying job, where do they go now? So it's kind of sad. It is sad that we're going to have more and more, I think, people who need the government assistance simply because there's not those jobs out there that could be where a person could be self-sufficient. I talk in my first book, A Build a Better Bridge, in Place the Parent, Inside Child Protective Services, about this grandmother who I was hoping to place her grandchild with, but her job had been, she had lost her job to automation and couldn't take felt she couldn't afford to care for her grandchild because she was already dipping into savings because she couldn't find a work. Where do we go for that? And the other thing about demographics is people think of poverty as poor families living in urban areas, but there's actually much poverty in rural areas and elderly poverty. Just under 10% of seniors in America are poor enough to qualify for food stamps. Why did they not have a job that that they could be self-sufficient in? Well, again, market forces, can somebody who's lost their job at 40 or 50 because their job's been replaced, can they acquire job skills that would again lead them to self-sufficiency? Obviously, some people can, but it's like people don't want to necessarily move. If you're settled in a community, you don't want to leave your family, you leave all your obligations simply because there might be another job in another state. So you also have to look at that human factor there.
And now, Lance, still talking about the standards of living in the US, do you think Americans are far better off than they were a decade ago or 2 decades ago?
No, I don't think. I think we're not better off. I think that especially the younger generation, my daughters coming up are young adults, and their generation is a little pessimistic that they will not have the standard of living that their parents had. The cost of housing is just like unrealistic. And so, yes, I think that's declining. I think, again, it's because there's too many people and too few jobs. What can you do about it? I think that, as I say in my book, there's not any one single answer. Just we've got to chip away at the individual things. Help the housing program by giving incentives to corporations to have employee purchased housing, tax codes to help, like Habitat for Humanity kind of things. But there's the demographics that's just there, that it's just going to be so many people. And I think that that's a sad thing, but we have to realize.
Thank you so much, Lance and Hillsinger, for sharing that thoughts with us. Moving on, now you talk about too many people and too few jobs. I think that's the reality each one of us has to face in the world in general. Now, the question I'd like to ask you is, going forward, what do you think the US social policy should be addressing at this moment? Now, we like to talk about in terms of crime, in terms of divorce, in terms of population, poverty, and the likes.
Well, just to talk about how important the jobs are, I just recalled that there was some meeting between an American president and a Chinese leader, and they were talking about nuclear weapons, and they thought, what do you most fear about it? The American president asked the Chinese president, thinking there'd be some response about nuclear power, says, no, I have to create 200,000 jobs each month. Otherwise, there's social unrest. Well, that's the implication there. We need to do lots of things. It's a catch-all thing as far as, I'm sorry, I lost a little question about I was going off about that answer. As far as what we can do to make the world a better place again, we need to improve food stamps, for instance. Food stamps and crime. Most criminals have had, and it's mostly men, the number of, for each man incarcerated, or I'm sorry, for each woman incarcerated, there's about 10 men incarcerated. So if we look at that sort of as a gender inequality issue, that may help us give a different focus. Most adult criminals had some sort of juvenile crime. And one of the things we need to do, how do we reduce juvenile crime? Well, two things. One, we have to have boys graduate school more often. The dropout rate for boys is much higher than it is for girls. And to go back to food stamps have been allocated the same way household size and income. Well, teenage boys need more calories, and so maybe we should adapt the food stamp computers to say, hey, okay, if you got teenagers in the home, you get an extra allocation, because we don't want that kid trying to, do something just because they're hungry, because they're irritable. Teenage years can be kind of irritable anyways, even if you're well fed. And if you're not well fed, then you might be tempted to not have the same judgment that you would. So that's one of the things that indirectly can help reduce crime, is by increasing the food allocation budget for teenagers. Because that mother with those two teenage boys trying to struggle on food stamps has a lot more struggle than other people, and the same dollars for, say, senior citizens. Not that I want to deprive anything from senior citizens, but we need a supplement for teenagers. And I think we also need to look at the school system too. The percentage of men who are teachers is declining, and has been declining for some years. And there's lots of studies that show that if boys have a male figure in the classroom, in the school, that reduces, all the behavioral outbursts and, being sent to the principal and expulsions and all that, suspensions. That if you have that, and we need to encourage, that's another one of the things that's sort of an indirect way to reduce poverty, is perhaps target to getting men to become teachers again.
Right. Lance, do you have any exciting news you'd like to share with my audience? Perhaps any project?
Well, yes, I'm working on a fourth book. I have a third one out, which is lesser known women of history. But my fourth book is tentatively titled "Not Your Mother's Bible," a new look at the good book. Because I look at the religion. We need the people who go to church are less likely to commit crime, or less likely, you have but somehow we've kind of poo-pooed religion lately. And what can religion do to bring people back into the pews? That's sort of the purpose of the book, because I think that it's important for kids to have moral education. Very, very few of my kids in foster care had any connection to organized religion. And I think that has declined. And what can we do to get people to act in a more moral way? And how can we encourage that? And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to work on, to perhaps how organized religion is sort of packaged to the general community isn't bringing people into the pews. And that we need that for society, and we need that for churches to be financially successful too.
I wish you best of luck in the project, Lance, and also in subsequent ones that you proposed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, and Lance, also, do you have any social media handles, any website that you like for us to reach you to?
Yeah, it's lancehillsinger.net. It's probably the best one. I have an Amazon profile, but lancehillsinger.net is the best website. It's the best way to go to.
All right. Thank you so much, Lance Hillsinger. You're an author and also a retired social worker. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, especially we focus on social policy and how the US, and the world in general can address this important policy. Thank you so much once again. We wish you the best of luck in all the projects that you embark upon.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, if you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms or any podcast distribution platforms that you bump online. You just go online and search for the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. There you go. You have an amazing time as you listen to expert and professional thought leaders share their thoughts and insight on disrupting mindset conversations on topics in government and politics, or science and technology, society and culture, and the environment. Now, we like to pivot the change that the world needs through disruptive mindset conversations. That's the main focus on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. Now, I always need you to stay safe. I talk to you soon.